Hello, storytellers, storytelling run. I want to talk about mission films. I just watched a great film. Well, kind of anti-Christian, but I still loved it as a Christian. So I want to talk about a bunch of films because I realized like how many films out there are about evangelism and church planting. There's like barely any, yet it is the foundation of Western culture. Every freedom and liberty you think you have came because of these missionaries. These missionaries planting churches across Europe, forcing pagans, well, actually, if you read Tom Holland's book called Dominion, he says that the historians have now accepted that the pagans flocked to the churches during the early 6th, 7th century because of the amount of charity that was being done and the amount of family values that it had versus the pagans who had no charity and no family values. And so the church exploded and the pagan temples were being abandoned. Obviously, there was a point where they had to start then enforcing some sort of moralistic decency. But anyway, let me get to these mission films. There's so few. This is going to be a short video, although I will find a way to babble on. Okay, let's just do it. Here we go. So the first one I want to bring up, just because it was what I watched last night and sparked this whole thing, is The Black Robe. It's actually really good. I was really impressed. This is a shaman. He encounters a shaman, and the dialogue in this film was just amazing. I really loved it because, boy, just there's during this period there's no apologetics. It's just really about faith and about heaven, like sort of the threat of hell and heaven. And what do you sell people that don't give a crap? And these pagans can make up whatever they want and say whatever they want and do slander and accusations and accuse him of being a demon because he's the way he looks and he's white and he's got hair on his face. It was just a really good story. And the funny thing is, I don't know if this is a spoiler. I don't think it's a spoiler, but the Indians that help him. The reason why I think this is anti-Christian is because the only sort of magical thing that happens in there is an Indian's dream sort of comes to fruition, his dream warning in his head, and then as he's about to die, he sees an angel of an Indian pagan goddess angel. So it's kind of a weird dreamy sequence or whatever that seems magical. Not that anything great happened out of that, but the part with the Christians is like depressing, demoralizing, and I still loved it because I just loved that it showed how deep and dark the Indians were. Dark, man, in this film. And it was, and I'm not, everyone's dark. Mankind is dark. The only light is some weirdo going through and saying, hey, there's a better way. There's a, and back then, and I agree with the film and I agree with the concept that back then it was probably kind of hard to evangelize because of there wasn't as much knowledge as we have today in apologetics and over the Bible and philosophy and talking to individuals. I'm not that I'm that great at it, but it was, they had a couple of bits of debates and dialogues between him and a white guy and an Indians, and it was pretty he didn't do such a great job, but I love that it showed failures and whatever and perseverance and all this stuff. So it's a really good, sort of depressing film, but beautiful. I really enjoyed it, even at the end when it was sort of depressing, and not like completely depressing, but depressing. And I'm going to get to that right now. Actually, the true history that this was sort of going on was the Jesuit missions amongst the Huron, and the Huron basically they died off because of disease, probably because of the Jesuits hanging out with them, and they had converted to Christianity, but they could never. And I'm reading this whole thing here, and they were kind of doing okay. But the Iroquois continually attacked them over and over and over. So it wasn't the Christians or the Jesuits or the Catholics who destroyed the Hurons. It was other pagans, other Indians. And they would not stop. They would not give them peace. And it's a sad, sad story, actually. And the Jesuits, and it was kind of a failure because they kept getting killed off by the Iroquois. And that's not really in the movie, but it says it at the very end, kind of a thing. And it's still a really great movie. It's really, really, really cool. You should watch it. But here it just shows, like, I'm reading through and it's like just boom, Iroquois attack. And the Iroquois get more and more vicious, and more and more murderous. And it's just that's not talked about. That's not mentioned. I'm impressed that Wikipedia does have it in here. Thankfully, that they at least have some truth in here. I'm sure maybe after this video they'll find it and erase that. But yeah, it says right here that they were just getting wiped out by the Iroquois all over and over, and more and more vicious. And the Jesuits, are trying to do peaceful things, and they're just getting wiped out. And there you go. That's paganism. See, you can have good, nice pagans, but you can just as well have evil, bad ones. For Christians, I know there's some oppression and stuff amongst, like, say, the Catholics versus the Protestants. But think about this: the Catholics versus the Protestants. That whole war thing happened for a few hundred years, because that's how long something takes before they realize it's dumb. It took like 100 years. Here's the thing: the longbow devastated the French knights. The English longbow. It took the French about 100 years to realize that and counter it. So that's the concept of history. It takes hundreds of years for things to come to fruition and realize. So the Catholic and Protestant, if you think about it, it started 1500 when Martin Luther King did his thing. Was it? I don't know if I got the dates right. But anyway, it started to wane around the 18th century, right? It was getting ridiculous. The fighting between. And today, Catholics and Protestants totally get along. For the most part. But anyway, I'm totally into Catholics and Orthodox myself, by the way, as a Reformed Baptist. Anyway, but this was just like, just sad, man. Just sad. Okay, let's move on. But a great movie. The Mission came out about the same time in the 80s. And this one was more like a bigger, more, Oscar or winning one or whatever. And this is with Jeremy Irons and Robert De Niro, who, it's pretty sad today. But this is a great film too. Really love this film. The Indians are awesome in it, and the story is very, very fascinating because, again, it's the Jesuits. In that, obviously, the first, the Black Robe is in Quebec, Canada. This one is in South America. And here's an amazing thing. And I'm reading through the mission story and the historical basis, and then the Guarani people. And it was like the Jesuits were building up these missions, and the Guaranis were going there, and they were actually going there to get help as well, because the Portuguese were slaving. The Spanish were not. The Spanish were trying to protect them. The Jesuits were trying to protect the Guaranis, and obviously convert them, because the Guaranis, religion and they had even had cannibalism and all kinds of animal stuff here, werewolves and animal shamanistic stuff. But the conversion of the Guaranis was helping them and protecting them from the slavers. And yes, I get it. The Dutch and the Brazilians were slavers, but so were plenty of Indians enslaving other people. And the Spanish were trying to end it. And the Jesuits were obviously trying to protect the Paraguayans, and they too eventually. And here's an interesting thing about the movie too, which I really like how it highlights. It highlights that the church was not as powerful as you and I, think. And this history of it shows it as well, because the Spanish and the Portuguese worked out a treaty, and the church had to follow along with it. So the church wasn't that powerful. I mean, they were they had some power, but they didn't have all power. They didn't control the trees and kings, and so they had to remove their missionaries, because when the Portuguese came in, they were going to slay everyone. So the Spanish had to move them out. But the Guarani did not want to leave, and the Jesuits did not. Some of the Jesuits did not want them to leave either, and so helped them fight. Whereas most of the Jesuits obviously complied with the treaty based on government, not on the church. The church wanted, obviously, there to be ending of slavery. But think about it. They didn't know how to end slavery. It was so vicious and brutal for hundreds of years. And so it wasn't like they could just tell the Portuguese to stop slaving. And even some of the Spanish did it in some areas, but they were trying to stop it here. So, and there was plenty of Spanish who just went ahead and did it because they're freaking, they're evil. If you forcefully enslave people, that's evil. Okay, the Christians do not do that. If you cannot be a Christian and then forcefully enslave people or murder people. By default, you're not a Christian. By definition, you're not a Christian. So if they're doing that, they're not Christians. But anyway, The Mission is a great film. I really like it because it shows some history. It shows the mission. It shows the Paraguayans. It shows them being strong in their faith by them on their own. So I really like that too. They became Christian and then owned it on their own. They didn't just they could make decisions, and they did not like the way that the Spanish were handling the treaty with the Portuguese under God. So that was a great film. I think good one to watch. Depressing, but still good because I like the type of history it's showing and the difficulties of history. All right, let's move on to this one, which is a little bit more, I guess, modern. I mean, the grandson is still alive, or the son of the one that's in the main characters here, or in the movie actually. End of the Spear is a great movie. Watch it with your kids. It's a great true story and happening to today, and I'm going to show you some stuff on that. But it's basically the Indian guy kills the missionaries. The family of those murdered missionaries come back to that tribe and convert them. And the man that killed the father of the son are best friends and love each other as brothers, in Christ. That is this incredible story of redemption, and it's a great, I'm sure many of you have already seen this. But this guy, Steve Sain, is the one that's doing. He's the son whose father was killed by the other guy. This guy right here. This old guy. See, and here's a reunion. Now he's really old. He's 70 something, and there's the man that killed his father. I think that was him. But they had a reunion 6 years ago or so, back in Ecuador, and these are all native people, and they lived and same with the Guarani, by the way, I read. They lived in a series of vengeance cycles where they would have revenge cycles like pagans do. They have revenge on another tribe. It would be a constant back and forth revenge thing. And then in the story, I even saw a documentary where they are admitting that they were going to eventually kill each other out as tribes because that was their vicious cycle of revenge. And only because of the Christians coming in and teaching them about forgiveness and love of God did they stop their vengeance cycle on each other as the tribes and started to learn about forgiveness and not eating people and not skinning them alive and not murdering them and having joy being with him and his children and grandchildren. These all came for this homecoming reunion. There's a cool little video here. Great homecoming Steve Saint right there. And what he did, he had a crash there. He had a horrible accident. But he started a technology company to help them, like flying in, supplies, medical supplies, and then even teaching them technology. And Steve and the main guy here, they went around the world, like on interviews and stuff. And it was just it's a great thing to see. He, got to see a credit card for the first time ever, when he's an adult. So it's an amazing story. You guys got to check out that movie, and even the documentary on it is really amazing. And some more video. And this is them here as they're a little younger here. Yeah, they're in Amsterdam together. This guy killed his father. That's what we Christians are, I mean, he's a better Christian than me, that's for sure. But that's what we are. We do seek forgiveness, not a vicious circle of revenge, hexes. We don't have hexes. We don't have curses. I think I told you in another video. I was talking to this young lady at this bar in Hollywood where my wife and I were going to the golf club. But we're talking to this young actress, and she literally started talking her paganism, and we're like, whoa. But it was fascinating because she said she lived at this apartment complex, and the landlords were terrible. So she put a little curse on them. She worked a little ritual out in the basement, and she was telling this like this is a normal thing. I'm like, wow. That's exactly how pagans think. They want to curse people that they find terrible or have a problem or an issue. And I told her, why don't you, maybe you could have prayed for them instead. And she was like, oh. I kept it light because I just wanted to go dancing. But sometimes you gotta turn it off. Anyway, I was like, what other missionary films are there, man? What other missionary films are there? So I just looked this up and found it. Jesus Revolution. Okay, that one's cool. I like that one. That one taught me how that I was always wondering about the 60s, the hippie age, because hippies were Marxists. They're the woke of the 60s that we're seeing today. They had drugs, sexual, woke crap. I heard Woodstock after they, was their pinnacle, but after they left, it was trash everywhere and disgusting. The Jesus Revolution happened right at the end of the Woodstock, and people were flocking back to Jesus because of how lame and crappy the hippie movement was, the peace beatnik cult movement. And the Jesus Revolution is not. I don't know. I've never heard of it. I mean, I've heard of hippies in high school and in movies and in all that. Never heard of the Jewish Revolution, but it was a huge movement back then that people returned back to Christ, got sick of the hippies in the 60s and the drugs and the sexual deviancy, and became Christian again. And it sort of started so from the 70s on, started kind of, and it became kind of a better culture. I remember, the disco and the 80s, but the 70s and 80s were pretty positive years when I was growing up. For the most part. Okay. Ooh, what's going on with this? End of the Spear. That's the one. I don't know why it's doing this weird thing here. Let me refresh this page. Okay. End of the Spear. Great film. The Cross and the Switch. I never heard of this. Cross and the Switchblade. I'm going to check this one out. Badge of Faith. I don't know. I'm going to check that one out probably. Silence. Oh, yeah. Martin Scorsese's film Silence. That was brutal. Just watching it, I felt like I got some heaven points. That was a tough one, and but it was good, man. Missionaries. I mean, that's a good. Oh, he was the young militant Jesuit in the Mission film, by the way, when he was younger. But not militant, but he was one of the ones that tried to fight, the Portuguese. But Silence, that was a good film, man. That was rough. The Japanese ended the. And what do you think? What do you think happened right after this? Right, the Japanese turned into an empire, worshipped their god, their emperor as a god. Brutal. I read the book Rape of Nanking. That was a brutal book on what the Japanese did to the Chinese. The competitions with their katanas on beheadings. What they did to pregnant women. They used rape. Etc. Etc. That culture of Japan came after this culture where they got rid of the Christians on island of Japan. So there you go. I'd never seen Mama Heidi. I've never heard of this. I'm check that out. The Hiding Place. Never hear about this one in any of the stories. But this is Christians who hit Jews during the Holocaust. I'd never heard of this. I mean, they hit a bunch and then they ran out of space and then they got caught. And everyone died but the one daughter of the family or something. So I just read a quick blurb on it, but I'm going to check that one out. This one, the most, C.S. Lewis, that one's kind of interesting, but it's just kind of a personal conversion. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, that's interesting. The Chosen, well, yeah. Okay. I don't know about this one, Chasing Revival. It's a documentary. But anyway, so as you can see, evangelism, church planning movies are like null and void, nil. I don't know of any, and yet we know the Western culture. Everyone knows this. All the celebrities who go to Italy and go to Switzerland and Greece, they go because there's churches there. It's a church culture there. I mean, it's changing now, obviously, and they're glad for that. They want their paganism back, obviously, but they don't want to go to pagan lands. They don't go to pagan places. No, they go to Europe for their fancy, expensive vacations, and you know that. Even though they don't want to bring up God or Christmas or anything, they want to go to where those cathedrals and churches are in Europe. That's where they go on their vacations, their exotic vacations to church lands. And they obviously, but they still want to deny Christ. But that's how it works. That's exactly how it works. They're reprobate. And I'm going to be snide and contentious about it. Okay. Final thought here. Apocalypto. Oh my gosh. This is the best thing ever. I'm going to display this in no sound. But this, I think this is from, I don't know who this guy is left, right? But this is them sacrificing people. I don't know what this part of it is. I thought I was just going to show the whole movie. To prepare, they're killing them. Look at that. They sacrifice them. It's the norm. It's paganism. It's brutal. They want to. I mean, I've got a book on it. I've only read the first like 30, 40 pages. I haven't because of the whole conquering of the, the Mazatlan or conquistadors and whatever. I got the book here, Conquest or something. But I want to do that setting at some point. I just don't want to read it. And my mouse is going crazy. Sometimes goes crazy. I want to do that sometime as a the setting, the conquistador thing. But this film is awesome. Apocalypto is like freaking. It shows pagans on pagan action, man. 70,000 in a day kind of human sacrifices. I mean, what the heck, I mean. And here we are just not talking about it. Just not talking about it. No, let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it. And, it's a very wonderful film. Well done. I want to see more films about, native, indigenous of America, North America, South America. But I want the truth. I don't want the sugarcoating. I want the truth and of these and what they went through and all the infighting and raiding and enslaving and sacrificing. And they use torture on each other in just horrific ways. This was not the case in the Middle Ages and Dark Ages. That's all a lie. Those medieval torture devices were all made in the 18th, 19th century for the most part as just showmanship and pretend, carnival type stuff. But torture in the Middle Ages, medieval times, amongst the Jesuits or whatever, was well documented and carefully done in an interrogative way, like waterboarding, like we do today. It wasn't done like the pagans did it. No, and the pagans didn't even torture them for a purpose, except for the joy of it, the bloodlust of it. So there were definitely good pagans, but incredibly evil pagans, and you could be either or you could be good on one day and really bad on another day. Didn't matter for paganism, right? But once you bring in Christ, you got to be good all the freaking time. Trust me, I'm quite aware of this as a Christian. All right, but what I love about this film, and I think this is a missionary film, and the reason I think it's a missionary film is because, I don't know if this is a spoiler for you, this is awesome. This is at the end of the film when when he's like fighting and escaping and barely at the last minute of his survival, he runs to the beach about to die, killed by other pagans, and this is what they see. And this is just an amazing. They're gonna kill him, and then they all freeze and go, what? And they see this coming from the ocean, and at the very end, and then he takes off. But this is the beginning of the end for the brutal cannibalism, skinning alive torture, wearing the skins. The shamans and priests did that. 80,000 human sacrifices a day, and I listened to an account on here. I've got to read the book at some point here soon. I listened and start that game setting, but I read an account or listened to an account on YouTube where the conquistador was talking to his men and like, we got to be careful what we eat because they had 200 dishes out from the emperor, and some of them had human in them, children, because that was their delicacies, and so they're all freaking out like, what do? We got to figure out which ones are. The emperor was laughing because he knew that they were trying to figure that out, and I thought that was silly. That is what we're up against, and we're being lied to constantly. We're not being shown that in these entertainment films. Instead, they're making the conquistadors and the missionaries look like evil people, like corrupt or something, or they're making them look like they're brutal and mean. They're obviously going after Christopher Columbus. We got to fight back. We got to fight back and rebuke them for their BS and the extent of the evil that they're doing even today with Planned Parenthood, with their butchering and surgeries and desires to castrate children before they even have a chance to become adults and decide who they are. Which they don't get to decide their sex, by the way. But we're letting that happen because we're letting them insult our past and making us feel ashamed of our church history, making us feel ashamed of the Templars and the conquistadors. I am proud of the Catholic Church. Grateful to the Catholic. I'm grateful to these people, these men who did what they did and risked everything. I'm grateful for them and for their Christian faith. I don't care how naive it was. I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful that God led them. I'm grateful for the Templars. I'm grateful for the witch trials. All of that was to stop evil, the paganism and the evil that is rebounding today. The witches are calling a renaissance. They have the Satan group, going into schools now. They're sexualizing the children. They're all that stuff. So we have to rebuke it. We have to stand up and fight. And this, I want to make a poster of this. I don't know. This is just an amazing shot. Mel Gibson is awesome. So yeah, missionary movies, not very many out there, and yet it is the foundation of this culture that we have of Hollywood, of entertainment. Our stories of entertainment are because we don't care. We're not afraid of the pagan stories, the Greek mythologies. We don't take them seriously. That's why we have all these fun stories and entertainment of stories. Christians are the ones that took all those stories and turned them into books. The Grimm fairy tales, the Greek mythology, that all came in as Christians. Remember the old Harryhausen Greek myth, Sinbad's, and then he did the Greek stuff too. But we turned it into entertainment as opposed to, we're going to offend the gods. We wouldn't care about that. We did not care about offending the gods. We made those into entertainment today. But now the pagans, instead of using it as fear mongering like they did in the past, they're using it as entertainment to lure us into that paganism. They're using it now in that sort of positive way, like, they're glamming on to Christianity to sell their paganism again. And we've got to fight it. We got to fight it in the culture, in our games, and we gotta not be ashamed. So rebuke all their crap. Tell them how bad their paganism is, and bring Christianity into everything you do. Okay. And game of life. Roll holy dice.